Cihat, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
So yeah, you've lived across continents. You're born in Holland. You were raised in Cape Town.
Yeah.
Now you're based in San Francisco. You move a lot. And you started out in aerospace before jumping into fintech, from defense tech to the dawn of e-commerce, from writing Visa's global risk standards to leading AI-driven compliance at Ballerine. You've seen every stage of fintech evolution. So today we'll dig into what those decades taught you about building trust at scale, pairing AI with governance, and keeping human judgment in an increasingly automated world. So yeah, you once got a career-changing call with the pitch, "Yes, but we do it on the internet."
Yes.
So what's made that moment click for you? And does this current AI wave feel the same kind of point of inflection that you saw back then?
Yeah, good point. Okay, yeah. So I worked for a software company, primarily providing systems to defense and aerospace and what have you. And I was there in a marketing function. And I got a call one day. And somebody asked, like, "Hey, we're looking for a marketing person." I'm like, "Okay." They're like, "Yeah, what do you do?" Like, "Well, we process payments for Visa, MasterCard, other networks." And I'm like, "Okay, so like, who doesn't, right? What's the big deal?" And then indeed, yes, the response was yes, but we do it over the internet. And this was just when the internet was taking off and e-commerce was brand new. And I was like, this could be interesting, So I decided to join them. And I think it was a good decision because I just talked to somebody today too who jumped into payments. It says, once you're in the payments business, I think you'll never leave, And it's pretty much like that. I think a lot of people can agree with me on that. So I ended up in payments. And I started on the marketing side, but then just kind of evolved on the operations and the risk components. And things evolved to that extent.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. And so, do you think like the internet moment and the AI moment are similar, different? Like, what do you feel there, being in payments from the dawn of internet to the dawn of AI?
I think it has a similar feeling for me, meaning when e-commerce came around and, we developed a gateway that actually did the online transactions and what have you. And it was very exciting and things were evolving and, you had to keep up to date with what's next. And once that kind of subsided, it was, you're in the groove and you're doing things, and e-commerce now is pretty well a standard thing, Once AI came around, it was kind of interesting, and I didn't know much about it. The only thing you hear about GPT and things like that, but that's like very rudimentary AI. But when I started working with Ballerine, I was really introduced into the depths of AI and how it can really revolutionize commerce or any kind of aspect of business. And it has that same kind of element to it where I feel excited about it and feel that blessed to be basically on that side, so pioneering that industry. Yes,
I love it. And so you began in aerospace and defense
on the software side.
On the software side, yeah. But I mean, I imagine it's a very structured and risk-averse space. Is there anything that carried over to your fintech compliance and risk?
I would say it was a completely different world. Obviously, if anything, we interacted. We did some business with large corporations or the government, and in that sense, I got kind of used to, doing that and I spoke at, like, for instance, Boeing for a press conference, and that was like, hey, this is pretty awesome, right? So obviously now in payments, that evolved. And in the end, I was working with multinationals and large financial institutions. But I think that component kind of carried over. Yep. My role was a little different. So, previous company I was in marketing, started in marketing, but quickly evolved into operations and risk. So that was a whole new world for me. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Would love to dive into a little bit more of your career evolution. So you've managed risk in the financial industry in a lot of places. You were at FinTechs as VP of Acquiring Operations at West America Bank and as Head of Global Ecosystem Security at Visa. Yeah. How did each environment change how you think about control, accountability, speed?
Sure. Okay. So, I mean, just for those who maybe don't know, I was on the acquiring side of payments. And generally what that means is everybody's pretty familiar with the issuing side. So the banks that issue you your card. And that's one side of the whole industry. And then the other side is actually the acceptance side. So the acquiring side sets up merchants for card acceptance and essentially acquire the transactions, the sales, and then, clear it into interchange. So that's the side I was on, the acceptance side. So a lot of people, when I talk to them, and I worked for Visa, they're like, "Can you do something about my bill?"
Yeah.
And I'm like,
And you can't.
first of all, we don't issue cards, and second of all, no.
Yeah.
So to that extent, on the acquiring side, yes, entered in through the fintech side, commonly known in the industry as an ISO, or an independent sales organization. Payment facilitators were involved and stuff like that. So I came in through that side, and what happened is those kind of businesses are really in the trenches. They're on the forefront. They work directly with the merchants. They have to connect to the networks and the processors. They have to work with the banks. But you're really kind of in the trenches. And specifically on the risk side, because you're responsible for a portfolio of merchants. You have to do the underwriting, the monitoring, the risk monitoring, or whatever. And I can tell you that in my career, there have been times when things didn't go perfect, and things blow up, or there's a fraud attack or whatever. To that extent, I learned a lot, from being actually in the trenches, doing it hands-on. So once I ended up at the bank and actually now managed a portfolio of merchants, but also fintechs. So now we have the oversight responsibility for the fintechs, right? Because the bank is held accountable by the networks. Yeah. So that added that extra dynamic. Now I had to have oversight over these fintechs, but I knew the fintechs because I worked in that environment. So it wasn't like brand new to me. I knew how they thought. I knew how they conduct business. And that really helped me. And then obviously graduating to the network itself, now you oversee a portfolio of financial institutions and fintechs too. So, but because I've been in that world, and I worked myself up through that entire stack essentially, gave me really good capabilities and visibility and understanding. So when I had to talk to big banks or big fintechs, they essentially knew what I was talking about because I lived in their shoes. So that was really helpful.
Yeah, I can imagine. And also talking about big banks and to big fintechs, you helped author the Global Acquirer Risk Standards and the Payment Facilitator and Marketplace Risk Guides. Yeah. What do you think aged best in that framework, and which piece do you think you'd need to rewrite today in the age of AI?
Well, good question. So when I authored the Global Acquirer Risk Standards, there was kind of like a fragmented earlier iteration of it, but it was not truly global, and it was not fully, one cohesive framework for acquiring risk, right? So I authored that, and it was very well used, not just by network participants like the banks and fintechs and what have you, but actually also by the federal government and other governments, non-US governments, because it provided a framework that protected the banks, the acquirers, but also other participants, the ecosystem in itself. So that went a long way. When I left Visa, I know they rewrote it, so it graduated. Yes, graduated. But funny enough, I have people still asking me, "Do you have an original copy?"
No way.
Yes.
Did you print some away, or?
It was a public document, so obviously I have it. Yeah. And yeah, literally one of the biggest banks in the U.S. not too long asking me, like, do you have a copy of that version? And I'm like, yeah, I do. But yeah, I mean, things always evolve, and the new version that Visa has is more applicable to what the new risks are, the new fraud schemes and attack vectors. But yeah, I think I also wrote the PF and Marketplace, or Payment Facilitator and Marketplace Risk Guide. Yeah. That's still on Visa's website, and it's still used. So I think that is really applicable today still. I think it really provides new fintechs with, hey, these are the risks. This is what you need to know. This is how you need to mitigate them, because a lot of these fintechs, they consider themselves to be technology companies, right? They create a tech product or some service or platform. And then, they enter the payments industry, and they have no idea that they're just entering a highly regulated industry that's very open to different risks that they're used to. And I've seen the wheels come off many times where fintech's like, yay, we're doing payments now. And then huge smoldering impact crater. So I was like, I'm going to write this guide. And it really just kind of provides the fundamentals and teaches fintechs like, hey, this is a new environment you're in. You're no longer just a tech company. Yeah. You have responsibilities. You're accountable. You could be exposed to risks that you've never thought about.
And so for all the fintechs watching us at home today, what do you say is the top 3 risks? What you've seen really a lot of fintechs fail really hard on?
I think one thing is indeed not maintaining a proper control environment. So meaning that, they're all about gung-ho, like let's do business, let's go to market, let's process lots of payments, let everybody into the payment system, all these merchants, but not really understanding who they're letting into the payment system. And then exposing themselves to fraud attacks and other issues, regulatory complaints and what have you. So it's good to enter the market and be gung-ho about it, but you need to pair it up with a proper control environment to really do it right, because the bad guys go after those that have the weakest link, and that's what I've seen. That's number one. Number two is just not possessing really good policy and procedures on how to carry out their risk control environment, and just kind of winging it. And that was one of the biggest things when I managed compliance for Visa and I saw a fintech or a bank just kind of faltering. The first thing I asked was like, show me your policies. And some of them may go, hey, here they are. And I'm like, hey, great. Okay, you got something. And some of them were like, wait, what? And I'm like, okay, there's your problem right there. Yeah.
Great. And so after 10 years of Visa, you joined Ballerine. You went from leaving a Dow 30 company to joining a 15-person AI startup.
Yeah.
So what tipped the balance? And what is the product, the people, the timing? Why did you join?
Well, first of all, it's a big difference going from a multinational to a startup. To me, I've never really worked for a startup, right? I've always been the corporate hamster wheel, and that was kind of my thing. And then when I left Visa, I actually took some time off, went back to Holland, spent some time just because my job there was extremely stressful, no pressure being the head of global security and integrity for the entire payment system. So I took some time off, and then I was contacted by Ballerine, and, at first I was like, okay, this sounds pretty interesting, but I wasn't quite sure, what I was getting myself into. But we started talking, and it really intrigued me, and I was like, okay, yeah, AI, this is really the next future. But I didn't know really what they did, but I understood obviously my environment and my field. So when I actually saw the technology that was being developed and kind of looking at it, to me, I was very much like, oh, wow, I wish I had this when I was like at the bank or, earlier. And it clicked, and I was very impressed with it. And it is a different world. In the corporate side, you have a specific function. You're like, mine was my function, and I have my group that is my function. It seems like in the startup world, like everybody kind of does everything. Like you don't have a specific. You have a quote unquote function, but in the end, everybody does everything. And so that was pretty interesting. And I'm sure like there was a little bit to get used to.
Yeah, how did you adapt? Because like you did go from Visa to that, and so I imagine like in terms of day-to-day responsibilities, adapting to fast-moving changes, and sometimes being in a really ambiguous environment of high growth issues and back to high growth, etc. Yeah. How does that really differ? How do you adapt?
Well, I think one thing, I've had a lot of help from the Ballerine leadership, so they really helped me just kind of understand, where we're going, what we're doing, more as to how I can help. I think one thing that's been really interesting to me is to train our AI models, because, I do have that knowledge, and to, hone in those models so they really perform really well, but it's a constant thing, I think the funniest thing is, if I can mention this, but so my girlfriend came from the startup world. She's very like startup. And now she's in the corporate world. She works for a big, multinational. Yeah. She works for a big multinational headquarters in San Jose, like that kind of stuff. And I'm the other way around. I came from the corporate world. Now
you don't look really corporate. You feel very startup-y.
Yeah. Hey, I've evolved. Well, I guess I felt I was the same in the corporate side. But it's funny, like when she gets home or I get home, she's like, this is what happened. I'm helping her, like, okay, this is how that works in the corporate world. But I'm like, wait, but I got this and this. And she's like, oh, this is how that works in the startup world. So we really augmented each other. She's been also a really good mentor for me. But like I said, the Ballerine folks, really helpful. And, I could see how they think now, and it is a different world, but it's very ambitious. It's good stuff.
And I think it's interesting because you said merchant underwriting used to take hours.
Yeah.
And what's actually happening now when Ballerine's AI can do it in minutes? Where's the time saved and what tasks disappear? And what do teams do instead?
Okay, yeah. Well, I used to underwrite old school. And, I mean, like, yes, does it take hours? It could take 30 minutes, it could take 40 minutes. I mean, very easy merchants could take quick. Like if it's a restaurant, it's been around forever, hey, approved, right? No big deal, no disputes, doing great. But sometimes you have to do like large e-commerce companies with future delivery and, maybe very little processing background. So in that sense, you really need to understand who you're dealing with, what the risks are, and you need to, like, still being done today very often is an underwriter is actually doing a lot of analyst work, going online, looking for the merchant, what's their website sell, how are they selling it, do they have any issues with regulators, with, I don't know, the FTC, you name it, or is there any negative media, do they have bankruptcies? There's all these facets that you need to find out. And in the old school, you just go online and you sit there and pulling it all up. You get the paperwork. You have to kind
Google
of nonstop. Go to the scam boards, hope to find something, whatever. Whereas with AI, specifically agentic AI, that is all very automated now. So to the point where you can just put a URL in, and the AI can go and say, okay, here's the merchant, go to the site. And then it's contextually aware, meaning, oh, well, they're selling crypto. So we're going to go to the SEC, or we're going to go like complaint boards, or these complaint boards. And we're not just looking at, okay, do they have a 5-star or 4-star rating? No, we go look at the 1-star ratings. And what do people say? Why are they having, like, my card got charged without my authorization. That's what we want to know. And it really does, like, essentially what an underwriter would take in like half an hour, 40 minutes, like 8 minutes, if that, and much more comprehensive. So the underwriter can just basically just be there to make the credit decision, look at it, once all the information is aggregated, and then decide, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to use mitigating controls to approve it? Are we going to do this? Or how can we, underwrite this account as opposed to just doing all the legwork? Yeah.
Yeah, no. And so what do you see teams will do then? Is there going to be more expansion, more growth? Is there going to be consolidation? How do we, deal with going from hours to minutes and make teams still productive? And
well, I think the biggest thing is that it's, number one, it's scalable now. So fintechs, that take a little bit of, like, they have to take a lot of time to onboard these merchants, can do it faster now. And they can pay better attention to the details. So, I mean, it's not like now they're going to sit there and do nothing. It's just that their job is more optimized to really look, okay, this is all the information, we have it, and they can scale. So now, for instance, if they start taking in more merchants, it's not like they're going to have to start hiring and doing a whole lot more stuff like that, or train people, because underwriters are hard to find, and experienced ones for sure. So now you have basically AI augmenting the process by providing the information. Importantly, not making the actual credit decisions. That's still what the underwriter does. There's certainly some fintechs that say, hey, we can score based on all this information. Anything with a very low risk score, just auto approve, right? But, that's on them still, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So legacy vendors, they decided to bolt AI on top of their systems, but Ballerine was built AI first. Yeah. So what would you say is a measurable difference? What measurable difference does that make?
So there's legacy providers that have been around for a while. When I talk providers, I'm talking primarily like the function of merchant monitoring. So there's a mandate from the networks that e-commerce merchants have to be periodically monitored to make sure, hey, what's being sold online? Are there any issues? Did they add any products that maybe shouldn't be there? And there are legacy companies that have been around and developed the technology to do that. And back then it was very relevant, but it was very rule based. So if then, right? That's very rigid. And in that sense, there are drawbacks. I mean, like I said, back then it was a solution and it made sense. These days, it delivers a lot of false positives. I'll give you an idea. Just strictly rule-based. If you're looking for a merchant, they're selling, okay, if, like it's a keyword search, if marijuana on the website, then flag it, as a risk. But what if a merchant's got selling iPhone covers, and there's a marijuana leaf on the iPhone cover, and it says, or a T-shirt, it says marijuana leaf T-shirt. It would be flagged by rule-based logic, right? Whereas AI, like I said, is contextually aware. It looks at everything and it goes, oh, okay, they're selling iPhone covers, so marijuana is not going to be a thing here because there's nothing else about marijuana. So that reduces the false positives, and it makes the workload so much easier for risk managers, so they don't have to start going to all these websites and say, oh, there's no problem here. And the AI can also flag something and then also explain itself. Like, hey, we got a problem here because on the website it says that, and here's the link to exactly where it is. So saving a lot of time.
Yeah, 100%. We see the same exact thing, like in compliance, it's things like the auditability is like probably one of the most important things that people want to see in those models. And like, especially like one thing is like fraudsters, they evolve really fast as well. Like I've seen sometimes like the evolution of the financial crime companies that fight financial crime goes just as fast as fraudsters goes fast because they compete one another. And how do you make sure that models don't just automate old biases or miss new tricks? Because I would imagine if you at Ballerine or us at Sphinx, we make a wrong decision on credit score you have to approve, or us like a compliance decision you have to make, the trust is really broken with the company you work with. Yeah. So what is the feedback loop? What do you have in place to mitigate that?
So number one, yeah, you're right. I mean, like on the fraudster side, there's this old school saying in risk, it's like when you build a 10-foot wall, they'll bring a 12-foot ladder, right? So there's always something. So it's like, I guess it's job security, right? And yes, now that, we use AI, rest assured that the bad guys use AI quite a bit. 100%. And soon like really leveraging agentic AI, so doing attacks at scale and very precise and more subdued than just brute force type stuff. And in that sense, like in Ballerine, like we maintain models that are specifically trained on the field of payments and fraud control and risk management, as opposed to just a straight up GPT that will, who knows, it'll come back with something, but not always that reliable and hallucinate, where our models are very trained, and we keep an eye on what are the latest rules, what are the latest trends, what are the latest attack vectors and things like that we need to know about. And then we train our models. And, that's kind of what people pay for is that those very trained models. And, how do we mitigate that, the model doesn't go sideways? There is human intervention. Yeah. So it's not just here's the model, good luck, here's the keys, and enjoy. We train our models and we closely monitor like output, and then we have a human element in it so that, we can look at it, qualify it. The main issues that we run into is that our models actually do too good of a job and bring back a lot of information. So we may want to just, tighten it down a little bit. But then we retrain our models based on the output and evaluate it and say, okay, hey, that's great, but this is what we need. And that's really a lot of value that we provide.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, I think. Yeah, we have exactly the same thing for us as well. And I think that, there's a balance to strike between like the amount of level of information that you bring, the quantity of it, not to overload people. And sometimes it's even harder to make it more concise and readable to someone rather than give them a huge dictionary of facts that you gave. So move fast and break things is one of like the startups' motto. Like every startup lives by it. We try to move as fast as possible, break things, repair it, and then move again and whatnot. Doesn't really always apply to payments and compliance and risk. Yeah. So how do you keep Ballerine fast but also risk-free or compliant? What's the internal mechanisms that prevent speed from turning into sloppiness?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is more fast-paced, but I think it's done in a controlled fashion. Like, for example, we don't just like, oh yeah, this is a great idea, roll out to production and enjoy it, right? So there's a testing environment, and we go through many iterations of testing, and we do roll out new capabilities. And that's one big thing I've noticed, like on the corporate side, it's like a aircraft carrier, right? If clients say we need this, we're like, yeah, we'll get to it. And, 1 year later, like, hey, is this what you want? Where in the startup world, it is completely different. We have POCs with clients, and they're like, yeah, but we really like this. And then, within very short order, we have something that's already been tested. And in that sense, it takes a lot of work. I can see, there's a lot of around the clock work that goes into this. It's not like on the corporate side, we'll talk to our team in Bangalore and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, this is like we're working on it all night. We have a deadline, and it is kind of like that. So to that extent, I don't see us breaking things. And like you said, it's probably not a good approach in the payments or financial sectors, but yes.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because, as you said, you've been both in the traditional corporate side of things, now in the startup side of things. And this space, compliance risk, is obviously very risk averse. Sales cycle can be long. There's a lot of skepticism. And so, you're often selling to traditional banks, acquirers, I imagine, with Ballerine. What is a way to convince a skeptical compliance head to trust your AI platform? Is it data? Is it demos? Is it relationships? Like, what really goes at play there?
I think one big factor is actually demonstrating the capabilities. So I'm often at trade shows or, engaged with like prospects, and they're like, well, tell me what you do. And I kind of tell them it's very abstract. We help with risk intelligence, merchant monitoring, all that stuff. And they're like, yeah, okay, that's great. But so do many other companies. So it isn't, the rubber hits the road when it actually, when they see it in action and see the product itself. And I've been literally in many meetings with, risk leadership where they're sitting around a table and, we show the capabilities, and they're literally like looking at each other like, are you seeing this? I mean, what is this? It's like, I didn't know this was possible. I'm like, yeah, it's so hard to explain. So I think the demos are super helpful because AI is new to everybody. And, it sounds, except, okay, you use GPT at home or whatever, Claude, right? But not like there's not agentic AI with that kind of power. And when you show it to them, then the wheels start turning. I'm like, oh, I get it. Yeah.
But always in startup demos, and even for us, is oftentimes nicer. It looks amazing. And then when you have to actually go to production, there's different data sources that are fragmented and are unformatted, and you have to orchestrate everything in order to actually make your decisions correctly and whatnot. How does that work for you guys? Like, how long is an implementation time, and where do you see the real stickiness of the product?
I'd say like the implementation depends. I mean, larger clients, we need to work with the tech group, get API set up and all that integration done, and, and sometimes customize things where, in reality, for a fintech, if they want to start using it overnight, it's like, here's the platform, here's your password, here's your environment, good luck, But so, for the larger players, it is a little bit more work on the integration side. Also, some of them are still very heavily dependent on legacy providers and very fragmented. So they use, one solution for this, another for that, another for that. And they have all these different platforms that don't talk to each other, where we have kind of like a unified platform that looks at all the data elements, all the risk intelligence, and then cross-pollinates it to say, hey, this makes sense, but that doesn't make sense, where that is generally not the use case right now in most of the industry from what I see.
Yeah, so Ballerine really has to orchestrate for those legacy players that have 6 different systems, all of those sources together.
Yeah, and obviously, they're already integrated and they've been kind of used to it. In some sense, some of them even have contracts that they just can't cancel overnight. So, I think the good thing is that we show our capabilities. They see what they're actually now missing out on, and then start working, an actual step-by-step program to adopt our technology. It's not like, oh, hey, this is great. Yeah, where do I sign? It's a little bit more work than that. Yeah.
And so you said that compliance with network rules is non-negotiable. How do you prove that AI decisions are really compliant? Like even for us, like we see, even sometimes when we show them the results with the audit trails and whatnot, they're like, I'd still rather have a human review it or do that. How do you go past that mental barrier?
So yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on what component of the network rules. I mean, there's obviously certain components that are fairly straightforward when it comes to, like, let's say, merchant underwriting and monitoring. If you get into more complex things, it is a little bit of a different world. But I think our side is, our models are trained on the rules and constantly retrained on the rules. I've seen our models do a really solid job. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we still have that human component to look at the output. And, it's kind of like in the background. So the client is not really in the loop, but it is something that's super important. Like I said, also rules change, regulations change, and yeah, you have to stay up to speed, and you have to see how the model handles that. Yeah.
And there's been so many companies that, like as you said, the systems or the environments in which analysts work in are extremely fragmented. They use a tool for this, a tool for that, and etc. There's never really been a runaway winner in compliance in RegTech, I'd say. There's really big companies. Of course, you have the LexisNexis and the NICE Actimize and the Compliant Vantage, etc. But there's never been a runaway winner. Yeah. Why do you think that is? And do you think that AI might actually change that?
Yeah, I think each solution provider or platform has like their own niche of what they do, like LexisNexis, and then there's like, for instance, there's OFAC compliance and then sanction screening and all that is another solution. So everybody has kind of their wheelhouse that they really do well. Where AI and good platforms come in is that, in our sense, we have the risk intelligence, we have the monitoring, we have the underwriting, but then we're not here to reinvent LexisNexis or other solutions, but we could easily API into that, which is what we do, and make it part of the entire workflow, right? So it's not just an alone standing platform, but now we have also the power of LexisNexis. We could even plug in the FI's transactions of their merchants into it and start cross-pollinating that as well.
And so, do you think the industry is ready for AI-specific compliance standards, or will existing frameworks like card network programs or OCC guidance simply expand to cover it?
No, I think at some point there will be some sort of compliance standards put in, specifically with agentic AI. Now everybody can build their own agent, and they go to websites and do who knows what. Like agentic commerce. Yeah. So now you can buy your shoes with an agent, right? But how do you know where your agent's going to, or how does the website trust who the agent is? So when there's a handshake between a URL and an agent, maybe there has to be some sort of solution where it's standardized or along that line. And I think at some point the regulators will probably catch up. But the regulators, they usually show up after there's already been a problem.
Yeah. So, yeah. They always do. Yeah. There has to be a problem for them to come in. Sorry, I didn't say that. And I just want to get back to what you said just right before. So like having AIs being able to cross-pollinate different systems and like being able to, for instance, use the power of LexisNexis and the power of Actimize together for a broader system. But you said those companies still cobble together tools for KYC, onboarding, monitoring, and whatnot. So I agree that today there's like this, cross-pollination, connecting systems together, allowing them to create a layer on top of it. But in 5 years, do you see there being one unified platform emerging, a modular ecosystem that actually plays nicely together, and what we're doing right now is actually going to be the standard and just be done in a better way? How do you see it in 5 years?
I think, if there was such a thing, I think to a large extent it would have already existed today. I mean, I think, there's always going to be competition. I don't think there's going to be one solution for everything. There may be some really, top competitors, but it's just the way of commerce. I don't think there'll be one overarching solution. Obviously, you have different networks, It is a complex ecosystem, and I don't see that really happening. I do see, some players that will stand out above the rest, but there will always be competition. Yeah.
Thank God. What's the next blind spot risk leaders aren't watching yet? There's AI-generated fraud and synthetic IDs and deepfake onboardings. What do you think is one of these big issues that might really cause problems to some risk leaders?
Yeah, I mean, I have to go back if I had to bring up something. It is the agentic component of AI to automate, agents with really good context capabilities, and to do it very fast over a broad scale. I think, as opposed to like old school, we had bots, which are, this is like next level bots, right? So I think that's really where something that we haven't fully comprehended yet as to what risk that could pose. Yeah.
And so automation is going to scale. What does the risk or compliance officer of 2030 look like? Is it a data literate operator managing AI pipelines, or a strategist focusing on edge cases and escalation, or on growth and expansion? What does that, risk officer look like?
I think, personally, the role of a risk officer is to have either a deep expertise of, risk in its field, and maybe you can't know everything, but to create a group or a team that has all the expertise needed to properly manage risk in that field. So expertise is really big. Either if it's a chief risk officer or the group he's put together, and then to constantly look at key risk indicators, to potentially look at the needles and where things, so to have a control environment. So if something goes sideways, you immediately know about it and you can immediately mitigate or contain or whatever it is, so to put that visibility in place, so you have real good oversight over things. And I think to obviously stay up to date on the latest fraud trends, threats, and what have you. Sure.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's go a bit more personal here. Personal insights, philosophical takes. I always like to go into it. You live by the motto "Memento vivere," remember to live. How has that mindset shaped your career choices and leadership style?
Well, yeah, I mean, to tell you the truth, the whole one is here. It is.
Here, right? Yeah, that's what I thought.
So, memento vivere, quia memento mori. So, yeah, remember to live because remember you die. So, I mean, it's a Latin saying. Obviously, I mean, it's pretty to the point, right? And that philosophy of mine is you have to live life. I mean, even when I work and work and work, you have to offset that with you can't just. You have to live life. So to that extent, I like to do things to offset the intensity of the work and what have you, right? Specifically, like in my role with Visa, there's a lot of responsibility. And in that sense, you need to have a little bit of a steam valve, So, yeah, I like to live life. I have a lot of hobbies that I do and things that kind of make me happy. On the other hand, I'll tell you this, my girlfriend likes to have another tattoo over in this arm that says what Dirty Harry used to say. It says, a man's got to know his limitations. It's like, hey, I know you like to live life, but it's a time out.
You're a bit like David Solomon from Goldman, right? You're really intense guy, but you also DJ.
Yeah.
Ever so often. You're DJing this weekend. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's a good creative outlet, and I've been doing it for a long time. But it is definitely when you're DJing or working on music and sets or whatever. That's all you think about. You don't think about all the other stuff.
I'm curious. I've always been curious. I feel like if you're in a startup and you tell, hey, I'm a DJ as well, no one's gonna be shocked. And then for being at Visa in the more corporate world, what is the reaction of people? Did they ever come to your sets? Did they ever? Yeah,
I have friends at Visa that definitely, like my music. I think some of we've DJed together. Some friends, Actually, at Ballerine, a good colleague of mine is also a really good DJ.
No way.
And so we're definitely like set to play together, like at an industry event, or when we're together sometime. But yeah, it is a little bit cooler on the startup side. You're like, hey, we DJ, hey, great, of course, Whereas the corporate side, you're like, you do what? What? How did that happen? But then again, I've worked with a lot of people. Like, send me your sets. You'd be surprised how many people like good music. So
I'm actually, I can imagine. Yeah. And you've also mentioned exploring Rupert Spear's work on consciousness. Yeah. How does that influence how you handle uncertainty or lead?
Yeah. I think it changes your perspective a little bit. Like, you're in the world, you're doing your stuff, everything seems so, reality is so, finite and solid, and you're doing everything. But do you ever really think about who you really are, and what you do here? And it gets kind of deep, what I'm saying? But you kind of learn that, in my sense, like, you're technically not just the meat popsicle, right? There's more to it. There's also a bigger, spiritual side to things. And when you start thinking about life that way, it shifts your focus. And I think you become more capable at handling things and not overwhelmed easily. And it adds a sense of zen or peace, Yeah.
And you've also mentioned you had a mentor at Visa who helped you navigate a really complex system there. So what's the most valuable thing you learned from them, and how do you mentor others now that you're on the other side?
Yeah, I think, and funny enough, I just had lunch with him. A really good guy. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like jumping in from a bank into a Dow 30 component and working in a very intense group, I knew risk. I've worked with merchants. I know the banking side. I know that the fintech side, but I didn't really fully say my expectations were like, oh my God, the whole how a corporation's politics and interactions and everything works within that machine, and how to navigate that. It's different, and it is more intense, and it's something also along the line where. I mean, everybody kind of makes mistakes, but in that level, it was almost like, no, we don't make mistakes here, right? And it adds a new level of intensity. And also, you have to learn all the different functions within an organization. And he was very helpful in helping me navigate that whole how everything worked. Like I said, the politics, the interactions, how to deal with certain leadership components, other functions, introduced me, actually, made me visible. And he wasn't like a leader who's like, hey, you tell me what to do and I'm going to be the guy. He's like, here, you do it, and that not many people do that. Not many people have the wherewithal to just say, hey, and the confidence to say, hey, as my subordinate, go ahead and, present to this, committee or whatever. And he was very comfortable with that. But he also gave me a lot of guidance, like, hey, great, well done, or what the hell was that? You could do better than that. So he was a really good mentor and helped me tremendously, for sure. And how that works today, I'd say, mentors are hard to find like that. If you find somebody like that in your organization, you're very lucky. It's a cutthroat business often, especially on the corporate side, and not everybody's willing to help you, So if you do find a soul like that, appreciate it, and also make them better. Do what you can to lift them up. That's very important. Yeah.
How heavy were the politics at Visa?
No, it wasn't like politics. It was just how to navigate certain things. Yeah. I would say, obviously. A big component was the fact that, you're like, one thing is if you're in meetings, it's just that you cannot just go sideways. You know what I'm saying? It's just, it is a very high level of expectancy. It's high stakes. And, if you do go sideways, you will know. People are glad to point it out to you. So in that respect, also like with certain components, I mean, how do you approach certain people? Each like certain leaders in certain functions, they kind of respond differently to how you approach them. So you kind of need to know that, right? You can't go to one person like, hey, this is this, and they're like, great. And you do the same to the other person, like, who are you? What do you want? And, get out of here. So I wouldn't say like politics, not in a bad sense, but more in navigating how to interact with people and their specific roles, leadership and responsibilities.
And how does that differ from being at a startup? Like I imagine it's much more flat, especially with the size.
Easy peasy. Yeah, totally different. I think my colleagues we're all in the trenches together, where nobody's sitting on a pedestal. Our CEO, he's just your buddy, what I'm saying? And that's different. So in that sense, that is not an overtone. It's more about getting things done and getting deliverables. Going to market is a really big thing, right? So in that sense, it does alleviate a lot of that pressure. But then again, it's offset by we need everything now. We need to close. We need this and that, and we need more. Because also, we have investors, we have this and that, and So in that sense, it's a balance. But yeah, much better in a startup from my experience.
Different levels of stress. Yeah. Cool. Well, I'd love to close with a few lightning questions. So what's the most overhyped buzzword in fintech right now?
AI.
I couldn't agree more. It's crazy how much people put that word everywhere. And I'm like, it's just everyone, like it is part of a process now. You can't like use it at your advantage. It's not an advantage anymore. If you don't have it, you're just done. You're cooked.
A good way to see what the buzzwords are is, like when you drive an I-80 to get on the Bay Bridge and back, and you see all these billboards, it used to be like in the day, it says like, what does it say, FPGA to like field programmable gate array to application specific integrated circuit, FPGA to ASIC. That was everywhere, that was the big thing. And then later it was like, e-commerce, so we do this, and e-commerce, and now it's all AI agents, AI. So you just drive down there and you know what the latest buzzword is.
Most underrated control that actually works.
In my world, you'd be surprised just to be having. It sounds basic, but I've seen it overlooked so many times. I'll reiterate: is just to have proper policy in place. First of all, okay, what are your intentions? What do you want to do? And then attached to that policy, you need to have, obviously your procedures and business processes, basically. And then you do have a control environment to make sure, and this is probably the most, to answer your question, it is to the controls in place to make sure that your procedures are effective and your policy is effective and being followed. And that's kind of how that works, yeah.
One Visa habit you kept and one you dropped.
Oh, wow. Interesting question. Let's see. One I dropped was, not worrying about everything on planet Earth. Well, I mean, on the risk side, there was always something, there was always crisis here, explosion there, whatever. But I think, one thing I kept is just that perspective from looking at the entire ecosystem, right? Having that visibility. That's very rare. Not everybody has that, especially on the risk side. You have folks that manage risk on the bank level or fintech level, and that's the ecosystem. And I had the privilege of looking at it holistically, from the bottom up, and even higher with the regulators, and the government and what have you. So to have had that visibility really helped me understand, how the ecosystem works, and also where to now, also when I approach a bank or whatever, to me it's like, hey, easy peasy, right? So that's probably one I kept, yeah.
And what's the hardest thing you've had to learn in a startup?
Sell, sell, go to market, more selling. And I'm not like a sales professional, right? So, but, I think, like I said, everybody's in the trenches together doing their thing, So.
What's one risk, rule, or regulation that you'd delete tomorrow if you could?
One rule or regulation? Honestly, I have to think about that.
All of them.
No, you need regulations. You need regulations. Yeah, offhand, I don't know. Nothing comes to mind. If anything, in some sense, it could be, there's certain things that could probably be regulated better, in my view. Yeah.
And last question, but if you weren't in risk, what would you be doing? I feel like I know the answer, but go for it.
Yeah, I own a club on an island in the tropics, making food, drinks, and playing music, and just have a lot of fun. I like scuba diving, so that helps out a lot. So yeah, there's my answer.
Love it. And is there anyone we should bring on the podcast next?
Yeah, I have some friends. I have some friends, former, one person comes to mind, former Secret Service guy, that really great friend of mine.
You have to come in with a cap and
sunglasses and stuff, and a trench coat. Yeah, with a big rifle. I mean, he's got some stories to tell, but I don't know if he can tell them all. But the thing is we worked very closely together, and we were just like it was never dull moments.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I'd love to have him there. Chi, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the time. And yeah, we'll take the conversation offline.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You.
All right, take care.